Keanu Reeves, yes, the Keanu Reeves, stepped into the spotlight of what would become the most jaw-dropping, hilarious, and downright controversial spectacle of 2025. It was an ordinary day at the sprawling Evergreen Plaza, a gleaming shopping utopia nestled in the heart of Los Angeles, when something extraordinary erupted, an event so wild, so absurdly exaggerated, that it would leave everyone watching with their jaws on the floor, desperate to know what happened next. Imagine the scene. A mall employee, a nobody in a faded uniform, absolutely losing it, trashing Keanu Reeves in front of a growing crowd, hurling insults so venomous they'd make a tabloid blush, all while oblivious to the greatest twist in mall history about to slap him in the face. The emotional stakes were sky-high, the tension electric, and the fallout. Oh, it was going to be legendary. The day began innocently enough. Evergreen Plaza buzzed with its usual rhythm, shoppers weaving through pristine corridors, the air thick with the scent of pretzels and expensive perfume. Keanu arrived unannounced, his presence subtle yet magnetic, dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, his dark hair swept back in that effortlessly cool way only he could pull off. He wasn't there for fanfare or fame. He was just another face in the crowd, or so it seemed. The plaza, with its towering glass ceilings and cascading indoor waterfalls, was more than a mall. It was a masterpiece, a monument to modern indulgence. Little did anyone know, it was also Keanu's masterpiece, a secret he'd kept buried beneath layers of humility. The trouble started near the central fountain, a shimmering marvel where water danced in hypnotic patterns. Keanu paused there, hands in his pockets, taking in the scene with that quiet intensity he carried like a second skin. Shoppers moved around him, some stealing glances, others too absorbed in their own worlds to notice the icon in their midst. But one person noticed. Oh, he noticed big time. This isn't just a story, it's a revelation. And if you want to see how far it goes, subscribe now before it disappears. Enter Marcus Tate, a lanky, disheveled mall employee in his late 20s, his uniform wrinkled and his name tag crooked, radiating the kind of restless energy that screamed trouble. Marcus worked the maintenance crew, mopping floors and emptying trash cans, a job he loathed with every fiber of his being. And on this day, something snapped. Marcus had been pushing a mop near the fountain when he spotted Keanu. Maybe it was the long hours, the low pay, or the simmering resentment he'd nursed for years, but seeing Keanu calm, collected, and effortlessly admired lit a fuse inside him. The mop clattered to the ground, water splashing across the polished tiles, drawing a few curious stares. Marcus straightened up, his face twisting into a scowl, and then it began, the rant of the century. His voice cut through the hum of the plaza, sharp and unhinged, as he pointed a trembling finger at Keanu, who stood just a dozen feet away, oblivious at first to the storm brewing behind him. The insults flew fast and furious, each one more outrageous than the last. Marcus didn't hold back, his voice rising to a fever pitch, accusing Keanu of everything from ruining Hollywood with his brooding nonsense to hogging all the good vibes in the universe. Shoppers stopped in their tracks, phones whipping out to capture the meltdown, the crowd swelling as Marcus's tirade grew louder, wilder, more unhinged. He stomped toward the fountain, kicking over a trash can for emphasis, its contents spilling across the floor in a dramatic arc. The man was a volcano erupting, spewing lava in every direction, and Keanu, poor, unsuspecting Keanu, was the target. Keanu turned slowly, his expression unreadable, those deep, soulful eyes locking onto Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and calm. The crowd held its breath, sensing something monumental was about to unfold, though no one could predict just how earth-shattering it would be. Marcus, oblivious to the shift, kept going, his arms flailing as he mocked Keanu's movies, his charity work, even his legendary kindness, calling it a fake act to trick the world. The air crackled with tension, the absurdity of the moment teetering on the edge of chaos. A security guard lingered nearby, unsure whether to intervene, while the crowd swelled, their whispers turning into a low roar of anticipation. Then it happened, the spark that would ignite the wildfire. Marcus, in his blind fury, grabbed a soda can from the spilled trash and hurled it toward Keanu. It wasn't a direct hit. The can sailed past, splashing sticky liquid across the fountain's edge. But the act was so bold, so reckless, that gasps rippled through the onlookers. Keanu didn't flinch, didn't dodge. He just stood there, a statue of composure amidst the storm, as Marcus screamed, "You don't belong here, pretty boy." The crowd was hooked now, phones recording every second, the scene spiraling into something straight out of a fevered dream. But beneath Keanu's calm exterior, something stirred, a flicker of resolve, a quiet storm of his own brewing in those steady eyes. The plaza seemed to hold its breath, the waterfall's gentle hum drowned out by the pounding pulses of everyone watching. Marcus, panting and wild-eyed, had no idea what he'd just unleashed. He thought he was the star of this show, the rebel taking down a giant. But Keanu Reeves wasn't just any giant. And what came next would flip the entire narrative upside down, leaving Marcus and the world reeling in disbelief. The stage was set, the players in place, and the greatest bombshell in mall history was about to drop, shattering everything Marcus thought he knew. The Evergreen Plaza stood frozen in a moment of surreal stillness, the echoes of Marcus Tate's unhinged outburst lingering like smoke after a cannon blast. The crowd, now a pulsing mass of onlookers encircling the central fountain, watched with bated breath as Keanu Reeves remained an unshakable pillar amidst the chaos. Soda dripped from the fountain's edge, a sticky testament to Marcus's reckless fury, while the air buzzed with the electric hum of anticipation. Phones stayed raised, capturing every heartbeat of this unfolding drama, their lenses glinting like the eyes of 1,000 silent witnesses. Marcus, chest heaving, stood triumphant in his own mind, oblivious to the monumental shift about to crash down on him like a tidal wave. Keanu's presence was magnetic, drawing every gaze without effort. His black jacket hung loosely on his frame, the faint sheen of the plaza's lights reflecting off its surface, making him seem almost otherworldly against the backdrop of spilled trash and glistening tiles. Those deep, contemplative eyes scanned the scene, not with anger, not with fear, but with a quiet, unshakable purpose that sent a shiver through the air. Marcus, still riding the high of his tantrum, jabbed a finger toward Keanu again, his voice hoarse but defiant. The words didn't matter anymore. They were just noise, a desperate attempt to reclaim control of a moment that had already slipped through his grubby fingers. The crowd shifted, a ripple of movement as people pressed closer, sensing the tide turning. A teenage girl in a bright red hoodie whispered to her friend, her voice barely audible over the murmurs, while an older man with a shopping bag clutched to his chest shook his head in disbelief. Security lingered at the edges, two guards in crisp uniforms exchanging uncertain glances, their radios crackling faintly with static. They didn't move yet. Something about Keanu's stillness held them at bay, as if he wielded an invisible authority no one dared challenge. And Marcus, he was too far gone, too drunk on his own rage, to notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Then Keanu took a step forward, just one, a deliberate, measured motion that silenced the plaza as if someone had flipped a switch. The waterfalls seemed to hush, the distant hum of escalators fading into nothingness. Marcus faltered, his outstretched arm wavering, a flicker of confusion crossing his sweat-streaked face. Keanu's boots clicked softly against the tiles, each sound a heartbeat in the tense silence, and the crowd leaned in, their collective breath held tight. He stopped a few feet from Marcus, close enough to see the wild pulse jumping in the younger man's neck, close enough to feel the heat of his unraveling bravado. Marcus blinked, his bravado cracking like thin ice underfoot. He opened his mouth to speak, another insult, another jab, but Keanu raised a hand, a simple gesture that carried the weight of a command. The plaza fell into a deeper silence, if such a thing were possible, as if the very air obeyed him. Marcus's jaw snapped shut, his eyes darting from Keanu to the crowd and back again, searching for an escape he wouldn't find. Keanu's voice, when it came, was low and steady, a calm river cutting through the chaos. though the words themselves were lost to the wind, inaudible to the narration, yet their impact was seismic. The crowd didn't need to hear what he said. They felt it. A shift, a turning of the page as Keanu's presence grew larger, more commanding without ever raising his tone. Marcus took a step back, his mop forgotten, his earlier fire sputtering out like a damp match. The soda can rolled lazily across the floor, nudged by an unseen breeze, and the absurdity of the moment crystallized. Here was a man who dared to challenge Keanu Reeves, only to find himself shrinking under the weight of something far greater than he could comprehend. Keanu tilted his head slightly, studying Marcus with an intensity that stripped away the bravado, leaving only the raw, trembling core beneath. The maintenance worker's hands twitched at his sides, his uniform damp with sweat, his name tag glinting faintly under the lights. The crowd watched, enthralled, as Keanu reached into his jacket pocket, not for a weapon, not for a phone, but for something small, something ordinary that would soon become extraordinary. He pulled out a sleek black keycard, its surface embossed with the Evergreen Plaza logo, a subtle detail that went unnoticed by most, but not by Lena Voss. Lena stood at the edge of the crowd, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was the plaza's operations manager, a behind-the-scenes force who kept the sprawling complex running like clockwork. Her arms were crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line as she observed the chaos Marcus had unleashed. She'd seen plenty of disruptions in her years at Evergreen, shoplifters, brawls, even a flash mob gone wrong. But this was something else. Her gaze locked onto the keycard in Keanu's hand, and a flicker of recognition sparked in her hazel eyes. She knew what it meant, even if Marcus didn't. The keycard wasn't just any access pass. It was the master key, a rare artifact reserved for the plaza's highest echelon, its owner. Lena's breath caught, her mind racing as the pieces clicked into place. Keanu Reeves wasn't just a celebrity wandering through her mall. He was the silent force behind it, the architect of its grandeur, a secret buried so deep that even she, with all her insider knowledge, had only suspected it in whispers. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard she held, the edges digging into her palms as she watched Keanu dangle the card between his fingers, its significance lost on the crowd but not on her. Marcus, still reeling, didn't notice the shift in Lena's demeanor. He didn't see the way her posture stiffened, the way her eyes widened with a mix of awe and dread. He was too busy trying to salvage his crumbling pride, his voice rising again in a weak attempt to regain the upper hand. But Keanu didn't let him finish. With a flick of his wrist, he held the keycard up, its logo catching the light, and the gesture was like a thunderclap without sound. Marcus froze, his words dying in his throat, his gaze darting to the card as if it were a grenade about to detonate. The crowd didn't understand, not yet. They saw the keycard, saw Marcus's sudden silence, but the full weight of the moment eluded them. Whispers spread like wildfire, speculation swirling as people craned their necks for a better view. Lena took a step forward, her clipboard forgotten, her focus narrowing to Keanu and Marcus alone. She knew what was coming. She'd heard the rumors, the quiet tales of a mysterious benefactor who'd poured millions into Evergreen Plaza, a figure who never stepped into the spotlight. And now, here he was, about to drop a bombshell that would turn Marcus's meltdown into a footnote in a much larger story. Keanu lowered the keycard, slipping it back into his pocket with a casual grace that belied the storm it had unleashed in Lena's mind. His eyes never left Marcus, who stood trembling, a deer caught in the headlights of his own making. The plaza seemed to pulse with energy, the tension coiling tighter with every passing second. The crowd leaned in, their phones trembling slightly in their hands, sensing the climax approaching but blind to its shape. Lena's heart pounded, her instincts screaming that this was the moment everything would change. And then, with the calm of a man who'd faced down far worse than a ranting mall worker, Keanu took another step forward. The distance between him and Marcus shrank to nothing, the air between them crackling with unspoken power. Marcus's bravado was gone, replaced by a flicker of fear, a dawning realization that he'd picked a fight with someone far beyond his league. Keanu's shadow loomed over him, not in size but in presence, a quiet giant about to reveal the truth that would shatter the plaza's fragile equilibrium. The stage was set, the players were poised, and the greatest revelation in Evergreen Plaza's history was seconds away from exploding into the open, leaving Marcus, Lena, and every soul watching forever changed. The Evergreen Plaza stood on the precipice of chaos, its polished facade trembling under the weight of an impending revelation. Keanu Reeves loomed over Marcus Tate, his shadow a silent promise of reckoning, while the crowd pressed closer, their collective heartbeat thundering in the air. The central fountain glistened behind them, its water catching the light in a hypnotic dance, but no one noticed its beauty now. Every eye was locked on the two men at the center of this storm. Marcus, his bravado shattered, stood trembling, his sweat-soaked uniform clinging to his frame as he stared into Keanu's unflinching gaze. Lena Voss, the plaza's steely operations manager, hovered at the edge of the scene, her clipboard forgotten, her mind racing with the truth she'd just pieced together. Keanu's presence was a force of nature, calm yet unyielding, his dark jacket rippling faintly in the breeze that swept through the open atrium. He didn't rush, didn't falter, he simply existed, a pillar of quiet power that made Marcus look smaller with every passing second. The crowd, phones still raised, buzzed with restless energy, their whispers a low hum of confusion and excitement. They didn't know what was coming, but they felt it, a shift so seismic it would rewrite the narrative of this absurd showdown. Lena's hazel eyes darted between Keanu and Marcus, her breath shallow as she braced herself for the explosion she knew was inevitable. Marcus opened his mouth, a weak attempt at defiance flickering in his throat, but Keanu didn't give him the chance. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached into his jacket again, pulling out the black keycard once more. This time, he didn't just hold it up. He turned it toward the crowd, letting the Evergreen Plaza logo gleam under the lights, its significance dawning on those closest to him. A gasp rippled through the onlookers, a teenage boy in a baseball cap nudging his friend with wide eyes, while a woman in a sleek blazer clutched her shopping bags tighter, her jaw dropping. Marcus blinked, his brow furrowing as he stared at the card, the gears in his sluggish mind grinding to a halt. Keanu's voice cut through the tension, low and steady, carrying a weight that silenced the plaza without effort. The words themselves were lost to the narration, their exact shape swallowed by the wind, but their impact was undeniable. He spoke with the calm authority of someone who'd held secrets far greater than this, his tone weaving a spell over the crowd as he revealed the truth. Marcus's eyes widened, his face draining of color, while Lena took an involuntary step back, her clipboard slipping from her grasp and clattering to the tiles. The sound echoed, sharp and jarring, but no one flinched. They were too transfixed by Keanu's revelation. He was the owner. Keanu Reeves, the man Marcus had trashed with every ounce of his pent-up rage, wasn't just a celebrity passing through. He was the mastermind behind Evergreen Plaza, the silent architect of its towering glass walls and cascading waterfalls. The plaza wasn't just a mall. It was his creation, a testament to his vision, funded by his quiet wealth and built under a veil of anonymity that had kept him out of the spotlight until this very moment. The crowd erupted into a frenzy of gasps and murmurs, phones trembling as people zoomed in on Keanu's face, capturing the bombshell that had just detonated in their midst. Marcus staggered back, his knees buckling as the weight of his mistake crashed down on him. He'd hurled insults at the man who signed his paychecks, the man who owned the very floor he stood on, the man who could end his entire world with a single word. His earlier bravado was a distant memory, replaced by a raw, visceral panic that twisted his features into a mask of dread. He stumbled over the spilled trash, his mop clattering against the fountain's edge, and for a moment it seemed he might collapse entirely, his body unable to bear the humiliation now suffocating him. Lena's mind raced, her composure cracking as she processed the implications. She suspected a hidden benefactor, yes, but Keanu Reeves. The man who'd walked through her plaza unnoticed, who'd blended into the crowd with an ease that defied his fame. Her hands trembled slightly as she bent to retrieve her clipboard, her thoughts a whirlwind of awe and fear. She'd spent years keeping Evergreen running smoothly, enforcing rules, managing crises. And now, the man who'd built it all stood before her, unraveling a secret that could upend everything she'd worked for. The crowd was a living thing now, its energy surging as people pushed forward, their voices rising in a chaotic symphony of shock and disbelief. A teenage girl screamed, her voice piercing the din, while an older man shouted something incoherent, waving his arms as if to punctuate the madness. Security finally moved, the two guards stepping closer, but they hesitated, their eyes flicking to Keanu with a mix of respect and uncertainty. He didn't need their protection. He commanded the scene with a presence that made their authority irrelevant. Keanu lowered the keycard, slipping it back into his pocket with the same casual grace he'd shown before, but his eyes never left Marcus. The maintenance worker was a wreck, his chest heaving as he struggled to process the reality crashing around him. He thought he was taking down a celebrity, a symbol of everything he resented, but instead, H-E-D Chinese letter, E-D the king of this castle, the man who held his fate in his hands. The irony was brutal, a twisted punchline to a joke he hadn't seen coming. Lena stepped forward, her instincts kicking in despite the chaos in her mind. She needed to regain control, to manage this spiraling disaster before it consumed the plaza entirely. Her heels clicked sharply against the tiles as she approached Keanu, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. The words she spoke were lost to the narration, but their intent was clear. She was offering support, a lifeline to pull the situation back from the brink. Keanu turned to her, his gaze softening slightly, a flicker of gratitude passing between them like a silent pact. Marcus, meanwhile, was unraveling. He sank to his knees, his hands clutching his head as the crowd's murmurs turned to jeers, their phones now weapons of humiliation aimed squarely at him. The soda can he'd thrown lay forgotten, a sticky relic of his downfall, while the fountain's water lapped at its edges, indifferent to the drama unfolding above. Keanu stood over him, not with triumph but with a quiet resolve, a man who'd faced worse storms and emerged unbroken. The plaza pulsed with energy, the air thick with the scent of spilled soda and the weight of 1,000 eyes. The bombshell had landed, its shockwaves rippling outward, but the story was far from over. Marcus's meltdown had been the spark, Keanu's revelation the explosion, and now the fallout loomed, a dark cloud gathering over Evergreen Plaza. Lena braced herself, knowing her role was about to shift in ways she couldn't predict, while Marcus teetered on the edge of oblivion, his fate hanging by a thread. And Keanu, he remained the eye of the storm, unshaken, his next move a mystery that would either mend the chaos or tear it apart entirely. The Evergreen Plaza thrummed with a chaotic energy, its pristine corridors now a theater of raw human emotion. Keanu Reeves stood at the heart of it all, an unyielding figure amidst the storm he'd just unleashed, his revelation still reverberating through the crowd like the aftershocks of an earthquake. The central fountain glistened under the lights, its serene beauty a stark contrast to the turmoil unfolding around it, while the air hung heavy with the mingled scents of spilled soda, sweat, and the sharp tang of anticipation. Marcus Tate knelt on the slick tiles, a broken man, his hands gripping his head as if to shield himself from the crushing weight of his own folly. Lena Voss, clipboard in hand once more, stood poised between action and uncertainty, her sharp eyes darting from Keanu to the swelling chaos around them. The crowd was a beast unleashed, its voices rising in a cacophony of shock, laughter, and outrage. Phones flashed relentlessly, capturing Marcus's downfall in high definition, while whispers turned to shouts, each onlooker vying to make sense of the bombshell that had just shattered their reality. A teenage boy in a hoodie climbed onto a bench for a better view, nearly toppling into the fountain, while a woman in a fur-trimmed coat clutched her pearls, her gasps audible over the din. The security guards finally pushed through, their radios crackling with urgent chatter, but their movements were hesitant, their authority dwarfed by Keanu's quiet command of the scene. Marcus's collapse was complete. He rocked back on his heels, his uniform stained with sweat and shame, his earlier fire extinguished by the cold reality of Keanu's ownership. His eyes, wild and red-rimmed, darted around the crowd, searching for an escape that didn't exist. The jeers rained down like hail, each taunt a dagger twisting deeper into his pride. He thought he was the hero of his own story, a rebel striking back at the world. But now he was the villain, the fool who dared to challenge a titan and lost everything in the process. His hand slipped from his head, falling limply to his sides, and for a moment he seemed to shrink, his lanky frame folding in on itself as the weight of humiliation pressed him into the ground. Keanu watched him, his expression unreadable, a mask of calm that hid the storm brewing beneath. "You felt that, didn't you? That was no ordinary moment. If it hit you, hit like and let's keep going." His dark jacket caught the light as he shifted his weight, the subtle motion drawing every eye like a magnet. He didn't gloat, didn't revel in Marcus's destruction. There was no need. His victory was absolute, written in the silence of his stance, the power of his presence. The keycard was back in his pocket, its black surface a secret weapon that had turned the tide without a single blow. He turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, and for a fleeting second, his eyes met Lena's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them like a thread stitching the chaos together. Lena seized the moment. Her heels clicked with purpose as she stepped closer to Keanu, her voice cutting through the noise with the precision of a blade. The words were lost to the narration, swallowed by the crowd's roar, but their effect was immediate. She gestured sharply to the security guards, her clipboard a makeshift scepter, as she directed them to form a perimeter. The guards snapped to attention, their uncertainty melting under her command, and within moments they were pushing the crowd back, creating a fragile bubble of order around the fountain. Lena's bun was slightly askew, a rare crack in her polished exterior, but her resolve was ironclad. She was the plaza's backbone, and she'd be damned if this chaos consumed it. The crowd resisted at first, their phones still flashing, their voices rising in protest, but Lena's authority held firm. She moved with the efficiency of a general, her sharp commands redirecting the energy into something manageable. A teenage girl slipped through the line, darting forward with her phone outstretched, but a guard caught her arm, guiding her back with a stern shake of his head. The tension simmered, a pot on the verge of boiling over, but Lena's presence, and Keanu's, kept it from spilling entirely. The plaza's pristine image was at stake, and she knew it. Every second mattered in containing this wildfire. Keanu turned back to Marcus, his shadow falling over the crumpled worker like a judgment. Marcus flinched, his breath hitching as he looked up into those deep, soulful eyes. There was no anger there, no malice, just a quiet intensity that stripped Marcus bare, exposing the raw nerve of his regret. Keanu's lips moved, his voice a low murmur lost to the wind, but the impact was seismic. Marcus's shoulders slumped further, his head bowing as if in surrender, the fight drained from him entirely. Whatever Keanu said, it wasn't a threat, it was a truth, a mirror held up to Marcus's actions that reflected his own destruction back at him. The crowd watched, transfixed, their phones capturing every angle of Marcus's defeat. A man in a suit near the edge of the circle laughed, a harsh, barking sound that cut through the murmurs, while a woman with a stroller shook her head in disbelief, her toddler oblivious to the drama unfolding. The scene was a circus, a twisted spectacle of hubris and reckoning, and Keanu was its ringmaster, guiding it with a subtlety that belied his power. He stepped back, giving Marcus space to drown in his own shame, and the gesture was deliberate, a king stepping away from a fallen pawn. Lena approached Keanu again, her expression a mix of urgency and respect. She leaned in close, her words quick and sharp, though their meaning remained veiled to the narration. Keanu nodded once, a single decisive motion that set the next act in motion. He turned toward the crowd, his presence swelling to fill the atrium, and raised a hand, not for silence but for attention. The effect was instantaneous. The jeers faded, the murmurs hushed, and even the security guards paused, their eyes locking onto him. The plaza held its breath, the air thick with the weight of what came next. With a calm that bordered on otherworldly, Keanu began to move. His boots clicked against the tiles, each step a drumbeat in the silence, as he walked past Marcus, past Lena, toward the grand staircase that spiraled up to the plaza's upper levels. The crowd parted instinctively, a sea opening before him, their phones tracking his every motion. Marcus remained on his knees, a forgotten relic of the chaos he'd ignited, while Lena followed a few steps behind Keanu, her clipboard clutched like a shield. The guards trailed after her, their radios buzzing with updates from unseen forces scrambling to regain control. The staircase loomed ahead, its glass railings shimmering under the lights, a path to the heart of Keanu's empire. He ascended slowly, deliberately, each step amplifying his authority, his jacket swaying with the rhythm of his stride. The crowd watched, their necks craning as he climbed, a figure ascending not just a staircase but a throne. Lena kept pace, her heels a counterpoint to his steady rhythm, her mind racing with the implications of what she'd witnessed. Marcus was left below, a broken silhouette against the fountain, the soda can glinting mockingly beside him. At the top of the stairs, Keanu paused, turning to look down at the chaos he'd left behind. The crowd stretched out before him, a sea of faces illuminated by the glow of their screens, their eyes wide with awe and confusion. Marcus was a speck now, a cautionary tale etched into the tiles, while Lena stood at Keanu's side, her presence a silent vow to weather whatever came next. The plaza pulsed with life, its pristine facade cracked but not shattered, and Keanu's gaze swept over it all, a king surveying his kingdom after a battle won. The fallout was just beginning. Marcus's fate hung in the balance, Lena's role was shifting beneath her feet, and Keanu was the fulcrum, the force that would decide what rose from the ashes of this chaos. The crowd waited, their breath held, as the next chapter loomed on the horizon, a storm of consequences gathering strength. The Evergreen Plaza stood as a shimmering monument to Keanu Reeves's silent reign, its upper levels bathed in the soft glow of recessed lights as he paused at the top of the grand staircase. Below, the crowd stretched out like a restless sea, their phones glinting like stars in the dimness, capturing every nuance of the drama that had unfolded. Marcus Tate remained a crumpled figure by the fountain, a shadow of his former defiance, his world reduced to the sticky tiles and the mocking gleam of the soda can beside him. Lena Voss stood at Keanu's side, her clipboard a talisman of order in a storm she could barely contain, her sharp eyes flickering with a mix of determination and unease. The air thrummed with the weight of what had just transpired, a volatile energy that promised more upheaval yet to come. Keanu's gaze swept over the plaza, his dark jacket catching the light as he stood motionless, a statue carved from resolve. The crowd below was a living tapestry of reactions. Some gaped in awe, others whispered furiously, their voices weaving a chaotic hum that rose to meet him. The security guards flanked the edges, their radios buzzing with static as they struggled to maintain the fragile perimeter Lena had ordered. The staircase beneath Keanu's feet gleamed, its glass railings reflecting the chaos like a distorted mirror, and for a moment, the plaza seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his next move. Lena shifted beside him, her heels clicking faintly as she adjusted her stance. Her bun was unraveling now, strands of dark hair slipping free, a subtle sign of the strain she bore. She'd spent years keeping Evergreen's gears turning, managing crises with a cool head, but this was beyond anything she'd faced. Keanu's revelation had upended her world, transforming the plaza from a workplace into a battleground where power hung in the balance. She clutched her clipboard tighter, her knuckles whitening, and cast a sidelong glance at Keanu, searching his calm features for a hint of what came next. His silence was deafening, a void that demanded to be filled. Down below, Marcus stirred. He lifted his head, his red-rimmed eyes locking onto Keanu's distant figure with a mix of dread and desperation. The crowd's jeers had faded to a low murmur, their attention split between the broken worker and the man who'd shattered him. Marcus's hands trembled as he pushed himself to his feet, his lanky frame swaying unsteadily. The soda stain on his uniform glistened under the lights, a badge of his humiliation, and his breath came in ragged gasps as he took a tentative step forward. He wasn't done. Not yet. Some flicker of defiance or perhaps madness sparked within him, urging him to reclaim what little dignity he could salvage. Keanu's eyes flicked downward, catching Marcus's movement with the precision of a hawk. He didn't flinch, didn't react, just watched, his stillness a weapon more potent than any shout. The crowd noticed too, their phones swiveling to track Marcus as he stumbled toward the base of the staircase, his mop clattering forgotten behind him. A teenage girl in the front row gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, while an older man with a cane muttered something sharp under his breath. The security guards tensed, their hands hovering near their belts, but Lena raised a hand, halting them with a single gesture. This was Keanu's stage, and she wouldn't let anyone steal it from him. Marcus reached the bottom step, his chest heaving as he glared up at Keanu, his voice cracking through the silence like a whip. The words were lost to the narration, swallowed by the wind, but their venom was unmistakable. He pointed a trembling finger, his face twisting into a mask of rage and despair, a final stand against the titan who'd crushed him. The crowd leaned in, their murmurs rising again, a tide of curiosity pulling them back into the drama. Marcus's defiance was futile, a candle flickering against a hurricane, but it was enough to shift the momentum, to draw every eye back to the clash at the heart of the plaza. Keanu tilted his head slightly, his expression unchanging, but a spark flared in his deep eyes, a flicker of something dark, something resolute. He stepped forward, descending the staircase with a slow, deliberate grace that turned every movement into a statement. The crowd parted further, their phones trembling as they tracked his approach, the air thickening with the scent of anticipation. Lena followed, her steps measured, her clipboard now tucked under her arm as she braced herself for the reckoning she knew was coming. The guards shifted uneasily, their radios crackling with updates from unseen forces scrambling to catch up to this spiraling chaos. Marcus faltered as Keanu drew closer, his bravado crumbling under the weight of that unflinching gaze. Each step Keanu took was a drumbeat, a countdown to a confrontation that would seal Marcus's fate. The plaza's lights cast long shadows behind him, stretching across the tiles like tendrils of power, and the fountain's gentle hum seemed to fade, overshadowed by the gravity of the moment. Marcus took a step back, his knees buckling again, but he caught himself against the railing, his fingers gripping the glass as if it could anchor him against the storm bearing down. Keanu stopped a few steps above him, close enough for Marcus to feel the heat of his presence, close enough for the crowd to see the stark contrast between them, one a broken shell, the other an unshakable force. His jacket swayed faintly, the black fabric absorbing the light, and his hands rested casually at his sides, a deceptive calm that masked the strength within. Marcus's breath hitched, his eyes darting wildly as he searched for an escape, but there was none. Keanu had him pinned, not with force, but with the sheer weight of his authority. Lena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension with a sharpness that demanded attention. The words were lost, their shape blurred by the crowd's hum, but their intent was clear. She was calling for order, for resolution, her tone a lifeline thrown into the chaos. Keanu nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement, and turned his gaze back to Marcus. The worker flinched, his defiance draining away, leaving only a hollow shell trembling in Keanu's shadow. The crowd watched, their phones steady now, capturing the moment when Marcus's fate would be decided. Keanu raised a hand, not in anger but in judgment, and the plaza fell silent again, the air so still it seemed the world itself had paused. His lips moved, his voice a low rumble that carried no further than Marcus's ears, but the impact was seismic. Marcus's face crumpled, his shoulders slumping as the last of his resistance shattered. He sank to the steps, his head bowing in defeat, a man undone by his own hubris and the quiet power of the one he dared to challenge. The crowd exhaled, a collective release of tension, their phones lowering slightly as the climax landed. Lena moved quickly, signaling the guards with a sharp gesture. They closed in, their boots thudding against the tiles as they flanked Marcus, their hands firm but not harsh as they lifted him to his feet. He didn't resist, his body limp, his eyes fixed on the ground as they guided him away from the staircase. The crowd parted, their murmurs rising again, a mix of pity and scorn following Marcus as he disappeared into the shadows of the plaza's lower corridors. The sodacan rolled lazily across the tiles, nudged by a stray foot, a final relic of his downfall. Keanu remained on the stairs, his gaze lifting to the crowd once more. The plaza pulsed with life, its pristine facade battered but intact, and he stood as its guardian, its creator, its king. Lena joined him, her clipboard back in hand, her composure restored as she prepared to face the aftermath. The guards vanished with Marcus, their radios fading into static, and the crowd shifted, their phones still glowing, their eyes still locked on Keanu. The reckoning had come, Marcus's fate sealed, but the story wasn't over, not yet. The plaza trembled with the promise of what lay ahead, a new chapter poised to unfold. Keanu's power was undisputed, Lena's loyalty cemented, and Marcus's ruin a warning etched into the tiles. The crowd waited, their breath held as the final act loomed, a storm of consequences ready to break. The Evergreen Plaza shimmered under the weight of its own resilience, its glass ceilings catching the last rays of daylight as the chaos of the day began to settle into something resembling calm. Keanu Reeves stood midway down the grand staircase, a figure of unshakable resolve, his dark jacket swaying faintly as he surveyed the scene below. The crowd, once a roiling sea of shock and outrage, now stood in a hushed reverence, their phones lowered, their eyes fixed on the man who turned their world upside down. Marcus Tate was gone, escorted away by security into the shadows of the plaza's lower levels, his defeat a permanent scar on the pristine tiles. Lena Voss remained at Keanu's side, her clipboard a steady companion, her sharp gaze softened by a flicker of relief as the storm she'd weathered began to subside. The air carried the faint scent of soda and sweat, a lingering echo of Marcus's meltdown, but the fountain's gentle hum had returned, a soothing heartbeat that pulsed through the atrium. The security guards lingered at the edges, their radios silent now, their presence a quiet reminder of the order Lena had restored. The crowd shifted, their murmurs fading into a low hum, a collective breath held as they waited for the final note of this extraordinary symphony. Keanu's revelation had shattered the plaza's facade, but it had also forged something new, a legend born in the heat of confrontation, a story that would echo far beyond these walls. Keanu descended the final steps, his boots clicking softly against the glass-edged stairs, each sound a deliberate punctuation to the chaos that had come before. The crowd parted instinctively, their bodies moving as if drawn by an unseen tide, granting him a path to the fountain where it had all begun. Lena followed, her heels a steady counterpoint, her posture straight despite the exhaustion tugging at her frame. Her bun was fully unraveled now, dark strands framing her face, but she wore the disarray like a badge of honor. She'd stood in the fire and emerged unbroken, a testament to her loyalty and grit. At the fountain's edge, Keanu paused, his shadow stretching across the water's surface, rippling faintly with each cascade. The sodacan lay forgotten nearby, its sticky contents drying into the tiles, a relic of Marcus's folly that seemed almost trivial now. Keanu's hands rested casually at his sides, his jacket catching the light in a way that made him seem larger than life, a quiet giant who'd reclaimed his kingdom without raising a fist. The crowd watched, their phones stilled, their breath held as he turned to face them, his deep eyes sweeping over every face with a calm that bordered on serenity. Lena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the silence with a clarity that anchored the moment. The words were lost to the narration, their shape blurred by the fountain's hum, but their purpose was unmistakable. She was closing the chapter, offering a resolution that would mend the plaza's fractured spirit. Keanu nodded once, a subtle gesture of approval, and the crowd exhaled, a wave of relief washing through them. The guards straightened, their shoulders relaxing as the tension that had gripped them for hours finally eased. The plaza was theirs again, its rhythm restored under Keanu's watchful gaze. Keanu's lips moved, his voice a low murmur that carried only to those closest to him, but its impact rippled outward like a stone dropped into still water. The teenage girl in the hoodie wiped her eyes, her earlier excitement replaced by a quiet awe, while the older man with the cane nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The crowd didn't need to hear the words, they felt them, a promise woven into the air that the plaza would endure, that its heart would beat stronger for what it had survived. Keanu's presence was the glue that held it together, a force of nature that had turned chaos into triumph. Lena set her clipboard down on the fountain's edge, a symbolic release of the burden she'd carried. She ran a hand through her loose hair, exhaling sharply as she looked to Keanu, her expression a mix of gratitude and resolve. She'd been the plaza's guardian in the shadows, but today she'd stood in the light, and the weight of that shift settled into her bones. Keanu met her gaze, a flicker of understanding passing between them, a silent pact that they'd weathered this storm together, and that the plaza was stronger for it. The crowd began to disperse, their energy spent, their phones slipping into pockets as they drifted toward the exits. Some lingered, casting glances back at Keanu, their whispers a soft undercurrent of wonder and disbelief. The teenage boy on the bench hopped down, his sneakers squeaking against the tiles, while the woman in the blazer adjusted her bags and walked away, her heels clicking a steady retreat. The plaza emptied slowly, its corridors reclaiming their pristine stillness, the echoes of Marcus's meltdown fading into memory. Keanu lingered by the fountain, his hands slipping into his pockets as he watched the last of the crowd vanish. The lights overhead dimmed slightly, signaling the end of the day, and the plaza settled into a quiet that felt earned, a peace forged in the crucible of confrontation. Lena joined him, standing a few feet away, her arms crossed as she surveyed the space she'd fought to protect. The fountain's water lapped at its edges, indifferent to the drama it had witnessed, and for a moment the two of them stood in companionable silence, the weight of the day lifting like mist. Then, with a final glance at the plaza he'd built, Keanu turned and walked toward the main entrance. His stride was unhurried, his jacket swaying with each step, a figure of quiet power fading into the dusk. Lena watched him go, her lips curving into a faint smile, a rare crack in her stoic facade. She picked up her clipboard, tucking it under her arm, and followed a different path, disappearing into the plaza's depths to ensure its gears kept turning. The guards trailed off, their radios silent, their duty done. Outside, the city hummed with life, its streets alive with the glow of headlights and the distant pulse of horns. Keanu stepped into the evening air, the cool breeze brushing against his face as he paused on the plaza's threshold. The glass doors slid shut behind him, sealing the day's chaos within, and for a moment he stood alone, a solitary figure against the sprawling skyline. Then, with a slow exhale, he walked into the night, his silhouette swallowed by the shadows, leaving the plaza and its legend behind. By morning, the story had spread. Whispers turned to headlines, videos of Marcus's meltdown and Keanu's revelation flooding the internet, a viral wildfire that lit up screens across the globe. The Evergreen Plaza became more than a mall. It became a myth, a place where a king had faced down a fool and emerged victorious, where power had been revealed in the quietest of ways. Marcus's name faded into infamy, a cautionary tale whispered in break rooms, while Lena's role remained unseen, a silent force holding the empire together. And Keanu, he was gone, his presence a memory etched into the plaza's bones. No interviews, no statements, just the quiet certainty that he'd left it stronger than he'd found it. The plaza prevailed, its glass walls gleaming under the sun, a testament to the man who'd built it, defended it, and walked away when the battle was won. If you enjoyed this story, there's another video on screen right now. Go ahead and give it a look for an even more astonishing tale. And don't forget, we'll have many more uplifting and dramatic stories coming your way. So make sure you subscribe to our channel. That way you'll never miss our newest uploads.